count my life of any value to myself, if only I may finish my course and the ministry that I received from the Lord Jesus to testify to the good news of God's grace. These are words from Paul. And Paul is such a critical and interesting part of the New Testament. He wrote 13 books of the New Testament, either directly or words handed down from him after his death. And he actually wrote the largest chunk of the New Testament in the shortest amount of time. But he focused on today is all about not knowing. Not knowing what he will be up against, but knowing at the center of it all, the love of Christ. And that is enough. And that's what we have to take and put into action in our own lives today. That sometimes that's going to be enough. Our neighbor has a daughter who's graduating high school, and at the church that they attend, they had all the graduates say something about their walk with God. And she talked about throwing out stability. And I just loved that idea. Because in reality, our lives are fluid. They are ever changing. We can make plans, and God can do something completely different. And she was saying, I've chosen a major, and I've chosen a college, but a year from now, that could be different. I could be somewhere else and studying something else. And she's exactly right. We spend so much time trying to be comfortable. But in reality, a lot of good happens on the fringe of our comfort zone. We want to stay in the dock, it's nice, it's easy, it's safe and sound. But it can be exciting when we allow ourselves to leave land and go out into the shore. And sometimes it's not going to be easy, and there's going to be storms, and our life is going to be upended. But then there's things that we are going to witness that are going to be beyond our imagination too. And they're going to exceed our expectations. So we have to take the risk, right? Even those of us who consider ourselves lifelong Christians, I think sometimes we get tripped up on trusting God. Trusting that God has everything worked out for us. Trusting in His plan, and trusting that it's all going to work for our good, too. And it's like we sometimes bargain with God. Are you sure you want me to do that? Because that's going to cost me a lot financially and emotionally and physically. I just don't know. I don't think I'm hearing you right. And it's one thing to read about these prophets and disciples and their stories, and then it's another thing to apply it to our own lives today. When I decided to get out of TV news, it was the right decision, but it was a huge leap of faith for me. I was taking a 60% pay cut, and I was leaving something I was familiar with. I had done it for so long, and even though I didn't like the direction that the industry was going, I was still comfortable with it. It was the same skills I'd used for decades, right? But in reality, it was a decision that had been years in the making. And I knew that I needed to do it. And I needed to trust in God's plan for me. And I also needed to trust that my family would have my back as well. And sometimes these changes, they're for a short season. And then sometimes they last for a while. And that's why you have to keep listening and following God's small, simple voice. And we have to consciously be quiet. And that's hard. I want to share with you a story of someone I met through Church Women United conference several years ago. Chaplain Eddie Hill has been the chaplain at J. Reuben Lum Detention Center for about 12 years now. And it was a job that he actually helped create. They didn't have a chaplain when he came to Horry County, and he had to convince the Horry County Sheriff's Office that a chaplain was even needed. And then they had to come up with the money for it. He had a family to support, so he had to raise his own funds, had to basically go out and ask for donations while he was in the process of trying to convince them that this would be a good thing for this jail. And when you're listening to him within minutes, his passion for helping people is clear. It is so genuine. And he says 96% of people who go to prison get out. So we need to decide what kind of people we want them to be when they do. And while Eddie felt like God had a plan for him, he says it wasn't always crystal clear. He was in search and rescue in the Navy, and after he got done with that, he moved to Florida and went back to college. And then he took a job with Sam's Club, and he did that for 12 years. And he went up the corporate ladder. And at the time, the church where he was attending, his pastor quit. And the other members of the congregation said, "We want you to be our pastor." And so he went to seminary. He totally changed his career track. And while he was serving as pastor, he started volunteering with the jail program down there. And that's when he felt God was calling him to jail chaplaincy. And eventually he came here to Horry County. And he tells of this story of one of the inmates who had been arrested 57 times. And one of the things that Eddie did when he started this program is he created jail diversion programs, several different, because there's lots of reasons why people wind up behind bars. So this inmate had gone through one of the programs and hadn't been arrested since. And he also shared about one young man in his 20s who had killed someone in a bar fight. And he said, going to J. Reuben Long was the best thing that happened to me, because I knew that the path that I was on was not going to lead anywhere good. And he found Christ behind bars, and Eddie helped him with that. Listen to what Paul says in the first chapter of Romans, verse 11. "For I long to impart to you some spiritual gift to strengthen you, that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine." I love that because it's truly the sign of a prophet. Not only do you share your faith with others, but then you reap the rewards of other people's faith. And you also glean insight not only from believers, but also from non-believers too. Paul wasn't afraid to share the gospel or to blindly follow God's instructions, even though he was going to endure pain and imprisonment, taunting, and eventually death. He was killed for his beliefs, but he was 100% committed to spreading the love and word of Christ. I was floored when I did some research and discovered how many people have been killed for their religious beliefs. A BBC article even reported it could be high as 100,000 people a year. And another article said in the past 10 years, as many as 900,000 people have been martyrs. Easter Day this year in Sri Lanka, more than 250 people died in bombings, hotels, churches. They were just simply practicing their faith. But I do want to revisit the last sentence in today's passage. What matters most to me is to finish what God started, the job the Master Jesus gave me of letting everyone I meet know all about this incredibly extravagant generosity of God. And that's what Paul is saying. This is what Paul did. He is an example to us. We need to spread the word so that everyone knows that they're invited, that they are all important, and they are all invited to experience God's generosity, which is all around us. Experience his grace, experience his love, and definitely experience his forgiveness.